It is so fascinating that any game Sweet Baby touches ends up failing and getting obliterated. Because here's my synopsis of this, right? Like, Sweet Baby Inc. made lots of money in the past couple of years because of the culture at the time, and that culture was more socially inclined than, rather to put out a better or a good product or a good game, right? It was, and companies 100% were fine with taking the loss in quality of game just to ensure tax write offs, to ensure, DEI, ESG money, DEI accolades, and all that, lower their ESG score. Like, they were willing to accept the loss in consumers. And at the forefront of this were consultant companies. So a couple of people that just is brought together and they make direct decisions on the product, on entertainment as a whole. And this is outside of what the consumer wants, because the consumer, again, don't care about all these social things. Like, all I want is a good game, and I don't care where it comes from. If it comes from America, if it comes from China, if it comes from Europe, if it comes from Africa, I don't fucking care. But Sweet Baby does care. They want anything that comes out of America to have their name slapped on it and have, their ideology slapped in it. And once that happens, it's like they're immune to, the games journalists attacking them. So, Sweet Baby Inc. zooms another game studio. Let's give us a watch.
So about a month ago, we talked about this game on No 9.
Hold on, let me do. I forget to do this every time. Boop, and you're gonna hear my washer in the background.
Awakening, and how it was another giant failure associated with Sweet Baby Inc. Kim Belair, have you been?
And that's the thing. I didn't even hear this game, Unknown 9. I didn't even hear about this game at all. I didn't even know it existed. I don't know why they're slipping projects and products, games that cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and just sneaking them out. Like, usually when a big game came out, you would want everyone to hear about it to maximize your potential profit and potential eyes on it. But now games comes out and you don't even know what they are.
Associated with Sweet Baby Inc. Kim Belair, have you been credited for working on the game, as well as David Bedard at Reflector, the dev studio behind Unknown 9 Awakening, who's also a co-founder of Sweet Baby Inc. So founding members of Sweet Baby Inc. have worked on Unknown 9 Awakening, and let's get a brief refresher of how that game's been doing before we take a look at the further news regarding this update. Hopping over to SteamDB, as of recording right now, there are currently 22 people in-game playing Unknown 9 Awakening on Steam.
Yeah, this is what I'm talking about, right? You don't know the game releases, and when it does, no one cares, no one plays it. It gets negative reviews. So, are games just being used as another tactic to launder money? So, games, you don't even need gamers to actually like the game. It just needs to exist, right? It is just such an odd situation.
Review score sitting at 33.47%, astronomically terrible, as well as the player count, of course. And the all-time peak player count is also awful, having achieved 285. To call this game a flop might even be generous. And I don't just say that because of the terribly performing game itself, but everyone associated with Unknown 9 Awakening.
Like, look at these arms. It looks like this was a male body type that they smacked a female face on. What the fuck is this?
From Reflector, Sweet Baby Inc., and even Bandai Namco seem to have thought that this would be a great, highly successful new intellectual property, as they were making their own cinematic universe of sorts, including various comic releases to go along with the game.
And look at all these, right? Okay, so I'm even just looking at the fucking the art. Like, this just looks like something I'd make on Windows Paint This hairstyle looks like something you could switch out. Like they had an entire universe made for this project before they even got the game out. And the game ended up being garbage. So what the hell is any of this supposed to be for? Right? It's not for the game. The game's garbage. Like,
and even a web series and scripted podcast. Oh, and also some novels, as you can see here. Got this whole thing lined up. So, like, let's just take a minute to just let this all sink in, man. Like, holy smokes, dude. This reminds me of Concord, right? Like, didn't the Concord people think that this was going to be like a long-term, like, Star Wars level successful IP?
And this is the problem, right? Like, they have such high expectations, high hopes for an IP, and it ends up just falling completely flat. And all these things, like, I'm assuming all of this was just for, like, shareholders to invest, because they're like, oh wow, they actually have a plan, they actually have a place to take this. And then the game just flops. And Concord was supposed to be the same thing, right? It's supposed to have all these, like, shows, animated things, all this stuff attached to it, but they didn't even know if the game was going to be good. And what we know, the game wasn't good. And I also hear that Concord's getting a lot of updates in the background, according to the people that bought the game and surprisingly haven't refunded it. But it's getting, even though the studio shut down and Concord is technically shut down, it's still getting updates on the back end. So my thing is they're going to release it for free and try to just shove it out. And Star Wars could have absolutely been this, but they put time, money, and effort to ruin the Star Wars franchise. And now that they're surprised that 80% of the projects don't stick.
Had, like, all these, like, huge ambitions for Concord. I mean, this is a similar thing here with Unknown 9 Awakening. Obviously, far less money spent on this than Concord, and I don't believe Sweet Baby Inc. was involved with Concord at all. I'm simply comparing how both have flopped entirely, and of course there's also similarities in things like DEI policies with the games, and also out-of-touchness and tone deafness from the people involved with both games. The point is, it's just funny to me, the similarities. It's really astonishing when people defend Sweet Baby Inc. They always cite, like, 2 successful games that they worked on, that being Ragnarok and also Spider-Man. And
yeah, but those games were popular. Like, Ragnarok was popular off the back of what God of War was. And they also worked on Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which was popular because it wasn't Assassin's Creed. It was a completely different fighting style. And because of that, people were fine with it. And Spider-Man, well, it was off the success of 1 that they worked on 2. But who's defending this company other than their shills and people who ideologically look at the world and think that regardless of the reason DEI exists, they're going to defend it?
The vendors conveniently never talk about the numerous, growing list of, like, extreme failures that Sweet Baby Inc. has worked on. And another point that I've brought up before is Ragnarok and Spider-Man had giant teams working on those games. In other words, SPI's involvement was probably kept at a minimum. But the games that have, like, far smaller teams, and therefore likely far more involvement from Sweet Baby Inc., tend to be these, like, huge flops, man. And now in this situation, I haven't even finished everything because turns out Reflector is going through layoffs. Similar to Zao, who worked with Sweet Baby Inc., who then had layoffs and then shut down their entire games division, it looks like Reflector is currently going down that same road.
Yeah, and I don't know why this is the case with that's my fucking wash in the background. I don't know why this is the case with every single one of these new companies that hire Sweet Baby and consulting companies. It's like the product fails, they get laid off, they get goodbyed, and then that's it. Like, they never, like, rarely do they continue. Like, the only games companies that tend to continue were those that are popular way back when. So surprisingly, like BioWare and EA and Ubisoft, I guess the legacy game companies that existed, but no, you have all these new companies propping up, releasing a product that's bound to fail only to get shut down. It makes you wonder, why do these companies even exist?
As that takes us to Eurogamer, who says Unknown 9 Awakening developers report layoffs. Reflector Entertainment's debut launched last month, and already they are now laying people off. Staff members who worked on Unknown 9 Awakening report layoffs across the team at Canadian outfit Reflector Entertainment. Jobs lost include roles within Reflector's art, marketing, narrative, and quality assurance teams. Game developer reported Unknown 9 Awakening launched last month to mixed reviews. On Steam, where it sits with a mixed rating, less than 100 players have rated the game.
There are so many consulting companies, so many coming from Canada. Like, Trump's always talking about building the wall to Mexico. I think there should be a different wall built on the border of Canada, because they're ruining our games. Like, consulting companies, DEI, like, these are now slurs because they were attached to just blatantly bad products, and people who don't care for the product, only care for ideology, will defend it. But people who play games, who don't care for your ideology, they absolutely will look at these things and be like, okay, Sweet Baby's on it. I'm assuming it's going to be shit. I'm not going to buy it. Yeah, that's usually just the way. And again, you can be mad at these people, but you can, insult them all you want, but you can't drag the $60, $70 out their pocket. I'm very bigoted when it comes to where I spend my money. And again, if I see things like DEI, like Sweet Baby, body type 1 or 2, or A or B, I'm going to just assume the game's garbage and move on.
The game was also meant to act as a central point for the franchise as a cross-media brand. Just this week, a second season of Unknown 9 Out of Sight tie-in podcast was launched, while the fourth issue of its graphic novel series Unknown 9 Torment arrived. There's also a web series, Unknown 9 Passage, which you can go watch on YouTube. We also have a quote that reads, "Unfortunately, I was affected by the layoffs at Reflector Entertainment, which means I'm currently looking for a job as a narrative designer or game writer. If you hear of any opportunities, please let me know." One staff.
I don't know if you want to say that on your resume. I don't know if you want to be like, oh yeah, I was a narrative design writer on a game that flopped. Like you might as well just put I'm a felon, or like put anything else. Like what? Put like, I don't know, I'm a criminal, because they'll be like, oh, God, thanks. At least you're not the narrative writer of Unknown 9. Holy shit, I just about had a heart attack.
Member who lost their job wrote. Eurogamer has contacted Bandai Namco for comment. They also mentioned that the protagonist Haruna was played in the final game by Anya Shalatra, aka Yennefer, in Netflix's The Witcher. And it was the first project from the Montreal-based Reflector, co-founded by former Assassin's Creed Unity creative director Alexandre Amancio. Returning to David Bedard, you may have noticed that he had also worked over at Ubisoft, seemingly Ubisoft Montreal. There's a recurring theme with a lot of these consultation firms like Sweet Baby Inc. and others that they are based out of Canada, and it does seem like a number of the people working there do indeed have ties back to Ubisoft. A top comment on Arkotaku in Action discussing this news would say, "I would have loved to be a fly on the office wall with the people in charge when the sales numbers for those novels and comic books started coming in." What sales numbers? The response reading, "It's highly regarded."
No, you wouldn't, because if you're in that room, I mean, maybe you're making money regardless, but if you actually care for gaming as a whole, you wouldn't want to hear all that. You're like, oh God, they're butchering our culture. They're butchering my gaming culture, and no one wants to do anything about it.
Why don't they do any market research and playtesting? Spend 5 minutes on YouTube and you'll see this is not a winning strategy. Virtue signaling may get you a lot of clicks, but it won't get you sales. To be quite frank though, all of this stuff is extremely bizarre. Like, you would imagine that they would care about sales, but then they talk about they, being Sweet Baby Inc. employees, having been on record talking about wanting to burn the gaming industry to the ground. On top of that, we've seen how a number of these consultation firms and their associates have been grifting off of government money, attempting to use DEI as a way of achieving ESG metrics, which helps them secure said funding. It's all extremely bizarre and corrupt, and clearly.
And then this is the thing, right, that I try to explain, but it's almost like people refuse to understand this. It's like a refusal to understand why these, I call them the AB, but they're like acronymic or like things exist. Like they simply exist to just suck up dumb money from anyone outside of the consumer, outside of the end product. And again, because of this, the product will suffer as a result. Because if you do not care if the product's the best, if all you care about is gamifying, in this case, DEI, just to suck up as much government grants, suck up as much, keep your ESG score as low as possible, the product absolutely will suffer at the end of the day. Even if it's just a little, but what we see is it's suffering a lot. And this is what people refuse. It's like they refuse to understand this. They're either ignorant, or they choose to be ignorant, or they know this is happening, they just don't care. They're just defending it because it's the ideology. And they're viewing their ideology like I guess, a religion. It's difficult to explain to people who haven't rationalized themselves into this line of thinking. They're treating it like any other religion because you can't talk someone out of it. They're like, no, this is the way it needs to be. And even if the product itself suffers, so fucking be it.
These people really shouldn't be in the gaming industry. They have no passion for games or gamers. As a matter of fact, lack of passion is an understatement. A lot of these people flat out despise gamers. So let me know what you think about all of that Sweet Baby Inc. and Unknown 9 Awakening stuff, and we've got one more thing to take a look at here. As I've had a lot of people tagging me and mentioning the situation in my comments, asking me to cover this, so let's take a look. Ollie Barter had said, Sony is in talks to buy Katakawa. And by the way, thank you all for the tags and comments. Now let's take a look at what he says here over on Forbes. In a pretty astonishing piece of news, it seems that Sony is in talks to buy Katakawa. According to Reuters, Sony is thinking of buying Katakawa, which would have massive ramifications for both games and anime. From a gaming standpoint, the big acquisition would be From Software, of which Katakawa has a controlling stake as of 2014. Admittedly, Sony already has a small chunk of FromSoft, along with Tencent, but this new setup would put Sony much more directly in charge. Considering Microsoft's recent acquisition of Activision, it makes sense that Sony would go after a company like FromSoft via Katakawa. Sony has had a long-standing relationship with FromSoft, going back to the 90s and the original PlayStation, so in theory, this could be a good matchup. However, my only concern with this is that the Japan studio at Sony was gutted recently. Okay, yeah, hold up, let's talk about that really quick.
Yeah, and again, the fact that Sony needs to defend itself being like, oh no, we're still a Japanese company, despite absolutely not being a Japanese company, because they hire, they're in California, so they hire people of that culture and of that specific ideology, and they do impose it on the products. But I guess to Sony's credit, they're actually a gaming company, unlike Xbox. Now, they're a piss-poor gaming company, but they're still a gaming company, unlike Xbox. And it's real odd that this thing where, like, every single all these gaming companies are being sucked up into mega conglomerates and effectively monopolies that, because they don't, like, Microsoft and Sony, they're not competing with each other. That's the thing. It's like they know they own a good part of the share of entertainment and of gaming, so they don't even try to compete with each other. It's why, again, Microsoft still manages to never release good games, or at least when they do, they take like 6, 7, 8 years. And why Sony can get away with making a $700 fucking console that doesn't even have a disk drive and they don't even have games and exclusives or any of that. But they demand $700 and they're selling a console based off things they could have already had in the console. They would make the console moddable, right? You know, and to have the pieces in like exchangeable like a PC. I would actually think it's a decent product and kind of worth it. Like not like to PC levels, but you know, just a little bit. I think it'd be worth it, but no, it's not worth it. And again, no one cares for the PSN network because it gets fucking breached every fucking month. Like shit be dropping like a goddamn uh, album.
So, back in 2021, yeah, Sony essentially shut down Japan Studio. Now, people often meme around with varying levels of seriousness that Sony isn't even a Japanese company any longer.
Yeah.
And Sony gutting or shutting down Japan Studio, however you want to phrase it, certainly does seem like a symbolic representation of that being the case. They attempted to justify this action by essentially saying that the studio just wasn't profitable enough anymore. And then what do they do a few years later? Get involved with Concord, losing about $400 million. Now, of course, a lot of stuff has occurred throughout all of this. This is just like a few brief points, but oh my gosh, dude. So we left off here. However, my only concern with this is that Japan Studio at Sony was gutted recently, and the same thing could happen under Sony to FromSoft. That would obviously be awful. The other side of
I don't know, because FromSoft can actually release good products. Like, you need at least one ace in the deck of shit to justify your existence. Like, I guess say what you want about Microsoft. I mean, there's still a dedicated Call of Duty base. Well, what other IP? Like, Microsoft has the Game Pass, which is a decent product until it becomes like $70 a month above the Microsoft Xbox Live. I mean, and the fact that they're putting older games on it, like say what you want, like the gaming culture as a whole is getting spat upon by these companies, but they have something to justify their value. It's just, again, a couple of things that are okay and a pile of shit. Like Nintendo still releases exclusives despite the Nintendo Switch being technically inferior in comparison now, but they do re-release the same fucking Pokemon game every year now. So yeah, I mean, they have something, but it's like, you know, gaming as a whole, like I'd say the range of the golden age of gaming or just entertainment as a whole was like 2000s to 2015, right? But after 2015, people, it's one thing, like gaming got popular, movies, TV shows, comic books, all these things got popular, and now you have people in these companies and people in these positions that don't care for you, the consumer. They don't care for the art itself. They just want to extract wealth from it to uplift themselves. And I think that's kind of where we're at now. And again, people are, again, like I said, the consumer base is like this force of nature. You can't control it. You can't bend and you can't contort it. It moves on its own. And it's moving away from these companies, which is why they have to buy up, you know, in some cases, other companies across seas, right? It's like if I was Sony, I'd do the same fucking thing. Same thing with the anime network and anime studios. Like, they have to do this. Now, is this a good thing for the consumer? No, because I don't want Crunchyroll to effectively own any anime that comes into America. Like, any anime that wants to enter the eyes of an American has to be funneled through Crunchyroll as like a middleman. It's like, I don't want that to happen. Even though I don't buy Crunchyroll and haven't ever paid to watch anime, like, I don't want just Crunchyroll to be the only means people enjoy that entertainment, because it's effectively a monopoly at that point. right? It's effectively a racketeering business, and that's just not the way things should be. Like entertainment has gotten so popular, so global that you shouldn't need one or two fucking companies to be the middleman between people's entertainment. Like that's just not something that should happen, and it's not something that really needs to happen.
This is Kadokawa's anime and manga output. Sony already has Crunchyroll and Aniplex, so buying Kadokawa would bring a huge amount of IP across anime and manga under Sony's roof. Kadokawa also has a sizable chunk of the Western anime press, having bought Anime News Network and owning Bookwalker, who run GX Plus. Yeah, well, Anime News Network and Sony, they would go perfect together, hand in hand, if you get that joke. The joke being Anime News Network's terrible reputation. It's a lot of stuff we could talk about regarding that, but I'm not going to bury the lead.
Yeah, I'm assuming that they're also ideologically possessed. Again, it's why does ideology and politics need to be added into every facet of people's interaction? Like the fuck I care your opinion on Trump. I want to play fucking video games, my guy. Like get that shit the fuck out of here.
At the end. The article would conclude saying, in short, this is a lot to take in and would have a dramatic impact across games and anime, not only in Japan, but also globally. Yeah, so I do think this would be pretty terrible stuff. Sony have an increasing grip, infesting their hands onto FromSoft even more, and clearly also not a good thing for the anime industry, in my opinion. We'll see how things continue to develop, but let me know what you think about all of this news, the Unknown 9 Awakening stuff, and this Sony stuff at the end of this video. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed my coverage, and if you did, please consider liking and or subscribing, and I'll see you in.
Yeah, and again, the problem with this is, again, you, the consumer, at the end of the day, will just get a worse product, because that's why monopolies are bad. And any company that exists wants to be a monopoly. Even though they know it's bad, you know it's bad. But companies are not moral entities. Like, they only really exist to make money for themselves. And if I was against Sony, this is a good move on Sony's part. But as a consumer of gaming, this is bad for me. The one pin is real. If Black Myth Wukong didn't give a shit about their blackmailing and still succeed, other studios should stop giving a shit about their blackmails too. I mean, it's easy to say that if, again, I guess Game Science is a small company and all that, and if they understand the odd culture happening in America, but if you don't, if you're, again, a business and you're like, oh wow, I can sell my company to Sony for an unabsorbent amount of money to where you don't have to work another day in your life, and you and your kids and your kids' kids will never have to work in another day in your life. It's like everyone likes to say they won't do it, but you'll never know unless you're actually in that position. Say it with me, boys, and nothing of value was lost. Yeah, I mean, I know 9, again, is yet another drop in the pan why companies use popular IPs and buy up popular IPs. Because when they try to go, it's like, when they try to go outside of popular IPs, it's almost like they don't try. Like we're taking Concord and we're taking Unknown 9 into consideration, I guess Duskborn. Every time they try to go outside the lens, it's like they run away from their Tard Wrangler and they go off the fucking rails. DEI is a scorpion on the frog's back. The only difference is the scorpion says it has a moral obligation to sting you. Abso-fucking-lutely. I mean, actually, thanks for the title. We're gonna burn the gaming industry to the ground, and they're right. They fucking are. Again, I don't think Sweet Baby is the problem. but they are a symptom, and they're a symptom that companies for some reason want to suck up ESG money and government grants. We hold the line until they yield. They got plenty of old games to dig through. Yeah, and again, this is the idea that the consumer has, that companies for some reason want to get rid of, but it won't work. Like, I have so many old fucking games. Like, I can go my entire life without purchasing a single Ubisoft product. Like, I identify as non-binary, as in I will not buy a single BioWare, a single Ubisoft fucking product, ever. You know, this game studio was unknown to me. Yeah, me too. Again, this is also the point I'm trying to make. These games exist, they prop up, but you don't ever hear about them. It's like they're coming in the dead of night, and you're like, okay, so what the fuck? Like, games cost so fucking much to make. You would want as many eyes on it as humanly possible. But for some reason, that's not the case anymore. Don't play the game, win, take notes. Genshin boycotters. Yeah. Yeah, again, the Genshin idea was odd. It's like the same people that was boycotting the game were also had like thousands of hours in the game, but they were boycotting it. So they didn't want other people to play it, including themselves. But they played the game. It was so fucking weird. Wow, that's SBI's kill streak when it comes to studios associating with it. I feel like we must be nearing double digits. I think we're in double digits. But it's not because of SBI. Like before that, you had EA buying things up, trying to make products and milk them for all they're worth, then shutting down companies. Now it's done for ideological reasons, and people using ideology to uplift themselves and their friends. All at the same time, nothing of value is being gained. Money laundering at its finest. Yeah, this is what I believe right here. It's just, and if you think of the ideology these individuals have, it's just wealth extraction. Like they want to extract wealth and extract money from the industry. It doesn't matter if the product's good. It doesn't matter if the consumer gets a better product. Hell, it doesn't even really matter if the studio stays alive. They just want us to extract them. Ragnarok and Spider-Man are both games with a set canon before SBI joined them, so they couldn't have much influence without rewriting and retconning. For gaming companies making completely new games IPs, though, their track record is horrendous. Yeah, I mean, again, I feel like, and you could see the changes that they've done, but they weren't big because the IP carried. But when it comes to original IPs, yeah, absolutely. They're absolutely blast them. But anyway, that's all I really got to say about this. I mean, they're at it again, and I'm surprised companies don't understand, or at least they refuse to understand this, that consulting companies and DEI, like these things, are just bad for the product, and you should drop it. But that's all I really got to say about it. Peace.